Why am I still suffering, even though I've done nothing wrong? That was the question Daniel asked me one quiet autumn afternoon, as golden sunlight spilled softly through the window. He was 34, educated, kind, a good man by any standard. He hadn't hurt anyone. He lived simply and mindfully. He practiced meditation every morning, donated to charity monthly, and even volunteered to teach yoga to children with disabilities on weekends. And yet, he was suffering. Not the kind of suffering you could name. Not illness, not poverty, not heartbreak. It was something quieter, something subtler. A silent weight that pressed on his chest day after day, a dull ache that followed him like a shadow with no name. He once told me, "It's like I'm alive on the outside, but something inside me has died. I go through the motions, smiling, working, speaking, but nothing feels real anymore." And maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've sat alone in the middle of the night, in a comfortable room, with everything you should need, and still felt a strange emptiness inside. Nothing bad has happened. And under the shade of a Bodhi tree, in the stillness of deep meditation, he discovered something simple, yet profound. Suffering is unavoidable, but it is also the beginning of awakening. From this insight, he distilled four noble truths, not as dogma, not as distant philosophy, but as a living path that anyone can walk. Not just monks, not just saints. Everyday experiences, the raw, unfiltered moments where suffering arises and where liberation quietly begins. This is not a sermon. It's not even a teaching. It is an invitation. You don't have to pretend you're okay. You don't have to carry this alone. Suffering isn't a failure. It's a doorway, a sacred one. And behind that door is the beginning of your return. I've tried to live a decent life. I work hard. I don't hurt anyone. So why does it feel like everything is against me? That quiet voice, maybe it once whispered in your heart, or maybe you've heard it from someone close to you, is a voice echoed by millions around the world. There are moments in life when, after all the striving, all the trying, you pause. Maybe it's during a sleepless night, or in the stillness of a lonely afternoon, and a question rises up from within. But I didn't do anything wrong. So why am I still suffering? We grow up believing that if we just live right, if we're kind, honest, hardworking, then life will reward us. That if we don't do bad things won't happen to us. But reality often tells a different story. A single mother who's worked tirelessly to raise her child finds out she has cancer. A young man who's honest and diligent is betrayed by his closest friends. An elderly person who's lived a quiet, kind life is abandoned in old age, left alone and forgotten. They didn't do anything wrong. They followed the rules. They tried to be good people. And yet, they suffer. Deeply. And slowly, a question begins to echo in the soul. A doubt about goodness. A doubt about life itself. And then, you begin to look around and realize you're not alone. Everyone is suffering. They just suffer in different ways. A friend of mine, a retired schoolteacher, once broke down in tears and said, "I spent my youth planting seeds of knowledge, inspiring generations to be kind and wise. I thought I lived a meaningful life. And yet, here I am, in a tiny rented room, alone. No one visits. No one remembers." Her story is not unique. It's the story of countless people who've lived good. There's a quiet illusion we all carry. If I live right, things will go right. If I do good, life will be good to me. But that's not always how life works. Because suffering doesn't always come from being bad or good. It comes from something far more subtle. Something the Buddha named over 2,500 years ago. Suffering is an unavoidable part of life. No one escapes it. No one is immune. Whether you're rich or poor, famous or unknown, wise or ordinary. There will be days when your heart aches. Days when you don't want to get out of bed. Nights when your tears fall and no one knows. Moments when you wonder, is this all there is to life? If you've ever asked yourself that question, you're not broken. You're not weak. You're not failing. You're just waking up. Because only when you stop and really feel the weight of your suffering, can you begin the journey to transform it. But to do that, you need more than comfort. More than motivational quotes or temporary fixes. You need a map. A path that leads not just out of pain, but into the heart of wisdom and peace. You've probably tried many things to stop the suffering. Working harder, distracting yourself with new relationships, chasing success or pleasure. escaping into entertainment or numbness. But those are like cutting weeds without pulling the roots. They bring relief, but not freedom. So what is the root? And is there a way to not just survive, but end suffering completely? This question isn't new. In fact, it's the very question the Buddha asked and answered more than 25 centuries ago. And in answering it, he left behind a path, a timeless teaching that has helped millions not just face their pain, but transform it into wisdom, compassion, and inner liberation. That path is called the Four Noble Truths. But before we can walk that path, we must first be willing to do something that takes great courage, to look directly at suffering, without turning away, without blaming, without numbing ourselves. And that's why the next part of this journey will ask, what is suffering really? Where does it come from? And can we truly be free of it? If you've ever felt pain and wondered why, then what comes next is for you. Not so you can get answers from someone else, but so you can begin to truly understand yourself. The journey is just beginning. 1. 2. No one escapes suffering, not even those who seem to have it all. There's a quiet yet pervasive belief that suffering only belongs to the unfortunate, that the rich, the famous, the talented, surely they must be happier than the rest of the world. After all, they have it all: wealth, status, beauty, love. How could they possibly suffer? And yet, the world keeps revealing stories that seem unthinkable. A beloved movie star at the height of her fame takes her own life in a luxurious mansion. A billionaire entrepreneur confesses he has lived with depression for decades, and no one knew. So what's really going on? Fortune or love? Daniel, a man once called the one who touched every dream, is living proof of this reality. He was the founder of a rising tech company in Silicon Valley, named in Forbes 30 under 30. By 32, he owned a luxury home in Malibu, drove the latest Tesla, traveled the world, and had over 3 million followers on social media. To outsiders, he felt drained but couldn't explain why. Each morning he woke up with no desire for the work he once loved. Even when surrounded by cheering crowds, he felt achingly alone. He tried everything. I'm like a machine that knows how to smile, give interviews, make decisions. But inside, I don't know who I am anymore. And in that moment of desperation, Daniel turned to the Dharma, not with his intellect, but with a broken heart. He came across an article about the Four Noble Truths, the core teaching the Buddha discovered upon awakening. The very first truth struck him like a bell. Suffering is the first noble truth of life. For the first time, Daniel felt understood, not by a therapist, not by a self-help book, but that sense of emptiness, confusion, or inner fatigue. Perhaps you've felt it too. And that reveals something profound. Suffering is universal, because suffering is not just about outer circumstances. It's about the inner experience. A person may have a beautiful house, car, or a perfect partner, and still feel insecure or incomplete. A person may be praised by thousands and still fear being forgotten. A person may always smile for the camera, but cry when no one sees. This, too, is what the Buddha emphasized over 500 years ago. In his very first sermon at Deer Park, he didn't speak about heaven or gods. He spoke about suffering. This is suffering. It must be fully known. This is the origin of suffering. It must be understood. This is the cessation of suffering. It must be realized. This is the path to the cessation of suffering. It must be cultivated. The Four Noble Truths, the Buddha's first teaching. Why would an enlightened being begin with suffering? Perhaps because suffering is the one thing we all share. Perhaps because only when we dare to face it, the path of awakening truly begins. A well-known psychologist once said, "Many who come to me are not poor. They're not even ill, but they feel." Or background. Not because they're wrong or broken, but because we live in a world that looks too far outward and too little inward. We are all walking through suffering, each in our own way. And from that place, real transformation begins. 1. 3. To extinguish the fire of suffering, we must go to its source. When we suffer, it has a cause, and only when we uncover that cause can true healing begin. Daniel, the man we met earlier, went through this exact struggle. He tried everything to ease his pain: exercise, wealth, relationships, wellness retreats, traveling the world. But none of it truly worked. They made him feel okay for a while, but soon enough, he'd spiral back into the same hollow place. Until one day, in a quiet monastery in Nepal, an old monk told him something that changed everything. If you keep pouring water on the smoke, the room will always be filled with haze. You must find where the fire starts and put it out from there. The words struck Daniel like lightning. They stirred something deep inside him, a quiet but powerful realization. When Daniel read the second truth, Samadhi, the origin of suffering, it felt as though a map of his inner world had been laid before him. Most of us believe we suffer because of things outside ourselves, because someone hurt us, because we lack something, because life is unfair. But according to the Buddha, these are only surface-level causes. The true source lies within, in what are known as the three poisons: greed, lobha, the endless craving for more; hatred, dosa, the resistance, anger, or frustration when life doesn't go our way; delusion, moha, the misunderstanding of reality, of ourselves, and of life itself. These three poisons are like internal fires burning quietly in our hearts. They cause us to chase after things we think will make us happy, only to find ourselves even more exhausted and lost. Here's the critical insight. If we don't understand where our suffering comes from, we'll never know how to end it. It's like being sick but not knowing what illness we have. We end up treating only the symptoms. Just as someone with depression might say, "I just need more rest," and inadvertently fall deeper into the pit. The truth is, recognizing the root cause is the first step toward healing. And the Buddha never asked us to believe blindly. He invites us to observe ourselves, our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, because that is where suffering begins. And that is also where it can end. Another story that Daniel heard during his time in the monastery was about a wealthy merchant named Devdatta. He had donated large sums to temples and done countless good deeds. Yet, he was constantly anxious, short-tempered, and unable to sleep at night. One day he asked a monk, "I've done so many good things. Why am I still suffering?" The monk replied, "You're watering the tree from its leaves, but its roots are rotten. It will fall eventually." Pain does not come from what happens to us. It comes from how we respond, from the patterns buried deep in our consciousness. If we don't recognize them, they will continue to shape our lives, often without us knowing. To truly extinguish the fire of suffering, we must turn inward. We must bravely face what's burning inside: unmet desires, unhealed wounds, false beliefs we adopted without knowing. This is not an easy path, but it is a necessary one. When Daniel began sitting in silence, observing his breath and watching his emotions rise and fall, he began to see clearly. Every time I'm angry, I'm afraid. Every time I'm sad, I feel unseen. The Buddha never denied that life is unfair or that tragedies happen, but he taught that it's our reaction to life that determines whether we suffer or not. We cannot stop the storm outside, but we can learn to calm the storm inside. And to do that, we must have the courage to confront our pain, not by fleeing from it, but by understanding it. Only then can we truly begin the journey of transformation, not through suppression or avoidance, but through awareness, insight, and compassion. 1. When all doors close. Some turn to the Dharma. There are moments in life when it feels as if the entire world has turned its back on us. Days when we wake up and ask ourselves, "Why am I even living?" Sleepless nights, not because we're busy, but because our hearts are filled with the shattered pieces of broken hopes. Moments of silence in a crowded room, when everyone else is laughing and chatting, and we're just trying to hold back tears. This isn't just sadness. It's despair, a kind of silent suffering that burns inward, like a flame eating away at the heart. And when every door seems to have closed, when modern solutions no longer offer comfort, some people begin searching for something deeper, something quieter. But when none of those things can fill the void, they begin to ask, is there another way to live? And as they turn the pages of the Buddhist teachings, as they listen to simple yet profound talks, as they sit down for the first time in silence to meditate, they begin to feel something they never knew they were missing: peace. Daniel once read a story during a quiet evening at a meditation retreat. It was from an anonymous writer on an old forum. The title was simple: "I lost everything, but I found myself in a small temple." The writer shared how they lost their job, their family, and even their belief in themselves. They once stood on a bridge, ready to give it all up. But a quiet voice within said, "Before you die, try living differently." So they left, went far from the city, far from the noise, to a monastery, a place where no one asked about their past. No one judged, only people sitting in silence, breathing, and looking deeply within. They said the first days were unbearable. The silence was suffocating. No phones, no internet, not even music. But in that emptiness, they began to hear something they had never really heard before, their own heart. The Dharma is not a magic cure that erases all suffering overnight. But it is a path that leads those in despair back to themselves. Not with empty promises, but with practice, with awareness, with a deep understanding of suffering and how it can truly end. People come to the Dharma not because they are happy, but because they have touched the bottom of their suffering. And in that rock-bottom place, they find a door opening, not from outside, but from within. Daniel once shared during a group meditation session. I used to think the Dharma was something far away, for monks and temples. But when my world fell apart. But something far simpler. Life is suffering. It sounded obvious. But for Daniel, it was the first time he felt truly seen. No sugarcoating, no platitudes. Just the honest truth. With the ability to look within every time pain arises. Like the young woman who found peace from postpartum depression through mindful breathing. Like the father who lost a child and learned to sit with his grief instead of escaping it. Like the office worker once overwhelmed by anxiety, who can now smile even when things go wrong. Not everyone finds this path early in life. But the beautiful truth is, the Dharma is always there, waiting for us to open our hearts to it. And once we step in, once we begin listening to the truth within every cell of our suffering, we start to realize there is a way out of suffering. It's not easy, but it is real. Part 2. What is the Four Noble Truths? An ancient spiritual path that still holds timeless value. 2.1. The Four Noble Truths. A comprehensive map of suffering and liberation. If there were a map to guide us out of the maze of human suffering, it would be the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha didn't leave behind a system of dogmas or worship of deities. Instead, he simply presented a set of profound truths about life. Four insights that penetrate the root of human misery. Suffering, cause, cessation, path. Dukkha, the first truth. Life doesn't go the way we want. Dukkha, often translated as suffering, is not just about pain, trauma, or sorrow. It refers to a deeper, more pervasive sense of discontent, dissatisfaction, and unease, from the smallest annoyance to the heartbreak of loss, the anxiety of change, the discomfort of aging, and the ache of unfulfilled longing. All of these are forms of dukkha. Dukkha is not a pessimistic judgment about life. It is simply a clear-eyed recognition of reality, that even the most beautiful experiences are impermanent, and because of that, they carry within them the seed of unease. Many people misinterpret the teaching, life is suffering, as bleak. But in truth, the Buddha was not preaching despair. He was like a wise doctor who tells a patient, "You have an illness, but I know the cause, and I have a cure." Samadaya, the second truth, there is a cause for suffering. Suffering does not arise by accident. It has causes, and those causes are not external, not someone else's fault, not fate's cruelty. The Buddha revealed that the root of suffering is craving, tanha, our relentless desire to hold on to pleasure and reject pain, to grasp what is pleasant and push away what is unpleasant. We suffer because we want things to stay pleasurable and avoid discomfort. But life doesn't follow our demands. The more we cling, the more we suffer in the gap between expectation and reality. Samadaya means origin or arising. It refers to the accumulation of mental habits, of grasping, aversion, and ignorance that build up over time. Like smoke arising from fire, suffering naturally follows from craving. When we stop feeding the fire, the smoke ceases. Nirodha, the third truth. It's possible to end suffering. This truth brings hope. If suffering has a cause, then by eliminating the cause, suffering can cease. This isn't just a belief. It's something we can observe in our own minds. Nirodha is not about never experiencing unpleasantness again. It means the end of suffering in the mind, the ending of our reactive tendencies, attachments, and mental bondage. When we are no longer slaves to craving, we can experience peace even in the midst of turmoil. Cessation is the goal. It is the state of freedom from greed, hatred, and delusion, where we no longer chase or resist, but live in clarity and ease. This is what Buddhism calls nirvana, not a faraway heaven, but a state of awakening here and now. Magga, the fourth truth. The path to freedom. If cessation is the destination, then the path is how we get there. The Buddha offered a clear and practical method called the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, seeing clearly. Right intention, thinking rightly. Right speech, speaking truthfully. Right action, acting ethically. Right livelihood, working honestly. Right effort, applying. Wholesome energy. Right mindfulness, being aware. Right concentration, developing mental stability. The Eightfold Path is not a commandment list. It is a living guide. A toolkit for transforming every part of our lives, from thoughts to behavior, from daily routines to spiritual practice. Anyone can walk this path, not just monks or spiritual seekers. The Four Noble Truths, a living map, not abstract dogma. These truths are not meant to be memorized like doctrine. They are a dynamic map for examining our own lives. What kind of suffering am I experiencing? What's fueling it? Is there a way out? Am I walking that path? In metaphorical terms, the Four Noble Truths resemble a healing process. You feel pain, dukkha. A diagnosis identifies the cause, samadaya. The doctor assures you that recovery is possible, nirodha, and offers treatment and lifestyle guidance, magga. This is not superstition. It is not about gods or blind faith. It is direct observation and deep understanding of how life and mind work. From personal struggle to collective liberation. Whether you're someone lost in confusion or someone who has achieved external success but still feels empty, the Four Noble Truths meet you where you are. They don't ask for belief, only for honest self-observation. And as you begin to truly see these truths, not in books. 2. Why did the Buddha speak only of suffering and not of gods? When people first encounter the Buddha's teachings, many are surprised. Why didn't the Buddha talk about God, a creator, not heaven, not sin, not cosmic origins, but the simple, undeniable reality? Human beings suffer, and there must be a way out of it. So why did the Buddha choose this focus? He remained silent on such matters not out of ignorance, but out of wisdom. Time and again, the Buddha made it clear, knowing these things doesn't help us in suffering. In the Majjhima Nikaya, middle-length discourses, the Buddha gives a powerful analogy. A man is struck by a poisoned arrow. Before allowing anyone to treat him, he demands to know, who shot this arrow? What caste is he from? Where does he live? What is the arrow made of? What kind of wood is it? What kind of poison was used? The Buddha says plainly, before he gets the answers, the man would die from the poison. And just like that, the Buddha explained his stance, speculating about whether the universe is eternal or not, finite or infinite. Who set the house on fire? Why did they do it? What kind of wood is burning? What direction is the fire coming from? Logical questions? Perhaps. But while he's busy theorizing, the fire consumes him. The Buddha knew this is exactly how the human mind works. We get caught in abstract curiosities while real suffering continues to burn inside us. That's why he didn't spend time debating the existence of gods or the beginning of the universe. He focused instead on what actually helps people, understanding suffering and walking the path to freedom. Buddhism isn't about worship, it's about practice. This makes the Buddha's teaching remarkably unique. It doesn't require belief in a god or rituals or blind faith. It presents a simple, practical framework. This is suffering. This is the cause. This is the possibility of ending it. And this is the path to that end. Just like a doctor doesn't need you to believe in her before treating you, the Dharma works if you practice it, not if you worship it. If you're in pain, you don't need philosophy, you need a cure. The Buddha is the physician. The teachings are the medicine. Mindfulness, ethical living, and insight are how you take the medicine. You don't need to be a monk, or shave your head, or belief, because it's not based on dogma or divine command. The Buddha's path is accessible to everyone, regardless of background, religion, or nationality. And spiritual seekers around the world now embrace Buddhist principles, not as a religion, but as a path of inner transformation. You don't need to convert or believe in reincarnation. You only need to be willing to look inward and work with your mind. A noble silence, full of wisdom. The Buddha's silence on metaphysical topics wasn't a lack of knowledge, It was an act of deep compassion. He said, "These questions are like thorns on the path. If you cling to them, you'll be wounded and won't be able to move forward." The wise do not chase every answer. They focus on what brings clarity and peace. Not everything needs to be known, only what frees you from suffering. In essence, the Buddha's refusal to speak on gods and metaphysics wasn't an omission. It was a deliberate and compassionate clarity of focus. He didn't come to indulge curiosity. He came to light a way out of suffering, not with fear, not with promises of reward, but with truth. But to live, there is a quiet truth that many longtime Buddhist practitioners overlook. The Dharma is not meant to be memorized, even less to be preached eloquently. The Four Noble Truths, Buddhism's most foundational and profound teaching given by the Buddha after his enlightenment, are not just 4 bullet points to recite. They are 4 living dimensions that must be felt through every breath, every step, and every emotion in our daily lives. Knowing the 4 Noble Truths intellectually is not enough. We must see, understand, believe, and walk them, as if holding a map while navigating the dense forest of life. Dukkha, if we don't see it clearly, we'll keep running from it. The first noble truth is dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction. It sounds simple. Life is suffering. Who doesn't know that? But there's a difference between knowing and seeing. To truly see suffering, to name it, to face it without turning away, that's a whole different depth. People suffer from broken relationships, betrayal, poverty, illness. Yet instead of confronting their suffering, they drown in blame, escape into distractions, or seek fleeting pleasures. Seeing dukkha doesn't mean complaining. It means being deeply mindful, honestly acknowledging the presence of dissatisfaction without denial. Like a good doctor who must recognize symptoms before treatment, a practitioner must face their inner state and say, "I'm in pain. I'm angry. I feel hollow." No sugarcoating. No excuses. When suffering is seen with clarity, it begins to lose its grip. That clarity is the first step toward healing. Samadhi, understand the root, not just the definition. The origin of suffering, samadhi, doesn't lie in external circumstances, but in our minds. It is craving and clinging, the desperate grasping for what we like, and resistance against what we dislike. To understand this isn't to win arguments. It's to shine a light into our own minds. Some suffering lingers for years, not because life doesn't change, but because we haven't let go. Craving isn't just about money or lust. It can be the craving to control others, to be praised, to feel safe. And when those desires go unmet, we suffer. Clinging means holding tightly to ideas, to the past, to our self-image. When someone challenges our ego, we get angry. When someone leaves, we collapse because we've pinned our happiness on them. To understand samadhi is to see how the mind creates pain. Reciting "suffering arises from craving" is meaningless if we've never observed it within ourselves. Nirodha, if we don't believe freedom is real, we'll never walk the path. The third truth, Nirodha, is the Buddha's bold declaration. Suffering can end, not by running away from it, but by transforming it at its root. Many don't believe this. They say, life will always be painful. To believe in Nirodha is to believe in the possibility of inner freedom, no matter the circumstances. Only with that belief will you commit to the path with sincerity. Magga, without walking, you'll never arrive. The final truth, Magga, is the eightfold path the Buddha laid out. Right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness. Right speech isn't just don't lie. It means speaking with kindness, purpose, and honesty. Right action isn't just don't kill. It means choosing a lifestyle rooted in compassion and ethics. Right mindfulness isn't just focus. It's being fully present in each moment. Eating when you eat, walking when you walk. Each step on the path is a step back to your true self, away from illusion. You can explain the map beautifully, lecture about it for hours. But if you never take a single step, you're still lost. The map only becomes valuable when you begin the journey. The reality, a truth that's always here, in this very life, not far, not hidden. If you're still suffering, still searching for a way out, don't despair. They only need one person brave enough to live them fully. 2.4. When knowing isn't enough. The trap of longtime Dharma students. There is a paradox that many people on the Buddhist path face. The more they study, the more they read, the more confused, and still deeply unhappy they often feel. For over a decade, Daniel, a successful entrepreneur in Australia, had devoted himself to the study of Dharma. He could quote entire suttas, recite passages from the Satipatthana Sutta, attend countless retreats both online and in person, and regularly hosted Dharma sharing sessions with friends. Yet one day, when his life fell apart due to a divorce and his only son decided to cut off contact, Daniel realized that all his knowledge of the Dharma suddenly felt meaningless. He spiraled into crisis. His decade of accumulated understanding couldn't save him from sleepless nights, paralyzing anxiety, and the heartbreak of a father who had lost everything. He began to question himself. I understand the Four Noble Truths. I know about impermanence and non-self. I've taught others how to let go. But why can't I live those teachings myself? This question isn't unique to Daniel. It echoes through the hearts of countless longtime Dharma students, those who once believed that mastering the teachings, reading sutras, and understanding karma and impermanence would be enough to end their suffering. But reality proves otherwise. Intellectual understanding alone has no power to transform the mind. The Buddha never urged us to memorize the Four Noble Truths to recite or preach. He taught that suffering must be fully understood. The cause of suffering must be abandoned. The cessation of suffering must be realized. The path must be cultivated. Each noble truth implies a living process, a dynamic transformation, something we must experience, not just know. If we only know that life is suffering, that suffering has a cause, that it can end, and that there is a path, then we are still standing at the threshold. Only by walking the path step by step do the teachings come alive. The most dangerous trap for seasoned Dharma students is the illusion of insight. They believe they've already got it, still cling to status, relationships, and possessions, and continue looking for something external to fill the inner void. The only difference is, they've learned how to use spiritual language to rationalize it all. They say everything is impermanent, but when a relationship breaks, they feel betrayed. They preach letting go, but tightly grasp success, recognition, and identity. They urge others to look within, but hop from one spiritual course to another as a form of distraction. For them, no more dissecting suttas. He returned to the basics, breathing and recognizing the suffering present in the moment. He joined a Vipassana retreat, where no one knew him as a teacher or an expert. There was only silence, observation, and facing himself. On the fifth night, he broke down in tears, seeing clearly the wounded child within him, terrified of abandonment and desperate for approval. That child, he realized, was the root of his suffering. From that moment, he truly understood. The Four Noble Truths are not an academic framework to analyze. They are a path to live, to uncover layer by layer of ignorance within, and to walk step by step toward freedom. Understanding without practice is like a doctor who's read thousands of medical textbooks, knows all the symptoms and cures, but has never actually treated a patient, not even himself. What use is that knowledge? Similarly, in spiritual life, someone who only talks about Dharma without living it is like a person holding a map but refusing to walk, forever stuck in the same place, perhaps not even realizing they're lost. So if you find that studying Buddhism has made you more analytical, but not more peaceful, that's the moment to pause and ask, am I living the Dharma, or just thinking about it? In the end, but to become a freer human being in a world full of chains. 2.5. The Four Noble Truths are not outdated. Only our minds are not renewed. As we journey through the winding paths of life, modern people may carry countless smart devices, therapeutic apps, self-help books, and personal development programs. Yet strangely, suffering remains just as persistent, if not deeper. Technology helps us go far and connect widely, but the heart still feels lost. Material comforts are more abundant than ever, yet the soul feels inexplicably empty. Suffering is not the fault of the era. It is the very nature of life that we've yet to fully see. The Four Noble Truths were spoken when there were no phones, no social media, no modern psychology. Yet they point directly to the core of our human experience. We suffer because we do not understand the truth, And we can only end suffering by seeing that truth clearly, one step at a time. The Four Noble Truths are not bound to any culture, race, political system, or religious ideology. They are like sunlight. For anyone still suffering, their light still matters. People often ask. The answer doesn't lie in the teaching. It lies in the fact that we haven't truly lived the teaching. The truth of suffering. We've only glanced at it, not dared to face it fully. It is our minds that are not renewed. The mind clings to the familiar, avoids discomfort, and resists change. It wants instant answers, quick fixes, while the Four Noble Truths ask us to see deeply, practice sincerely, and transform patiently. If anything needs to be modernized, it's not the teaching, it's our perspective on it. We must approach the Four Noble Truths not with reverence or desperation, but with profound honesty. Where exactly am I suffering? How am I unknowingly feeding its causes? Do I genuinely believe that suffering can end? Am I truly walking the path to end it? Someone once said, every generation must rediscover the Four Noble Truths as if they were being taught for the very first time. That's no exaggeration, it's the truth. Each time we face a new kind of pain, a loss, an internal collapse, we are standing at the gateway to rediscover the Four Noble Truths with fresh eyes. Like a timeless poem, never outdated, because its readers are always new. The teachings may lie dormant in books, scriptures, or meditation retreats, but when the heart is ready, they awaken, speaking from the deepest place within. Daniel, who had suffered the collapse of his family, once thought the Four Noble Truths were just a theoretical framework. But after falling into the depths of sorrow, he began to realize that every single word was a call from the very core of life itself. There's no need to modernize the teachings. We only need to let them flow into the living stream of our experience. The Four Noble Truths were not designed for saints. They are for us, ordinary people who suffer, right here, right now. So instead of asking, are these teachings still relevant? Ask, am I living them fully? From this point onward, and when you dare to look into suffering, not avoiding, not judging, not decorating it, that is the moment the first door opens. Not to bring more fear, but to reveal its nature. And from there, the possibility of liberation arises. Part 3. The Truth of Suffering, Dukkha, Recognizing Suffering in Daily Life. 3.1. Suffering is not far away. It exists in every moment of life. As we move on from section 2.5, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The Four Noble Truths are not outdated theories or ancient dogmas. And every uncertain step we take in this modern world. And the first truth in this spiritual map is the truth of suffering, dukkha. But this suffering that the Buddha referred to, is it truly what we often imagine it to be? Many people, when first encountering the teachings, frown or shake their heads at the mention of suffering. Some even brush it off. Life has its ups and downs. It's not like we're always suffering. That's because they're still understanding the word suffering, dukkha, in the ordinary sense, physical pain, sadness when someone dies, or misfortune. But in Buddhist wisdom, dukkha goes much deeper. It's not just pain. It is discontent, the subtle sense of incompleteness, the dissatisfaction that permeates all aspects of life. And the truth is, it's happening almost all the time. We suffer not just when we're sick, brokenhearted, or bankrupt. We suffer even when everything seems fine. Suffering shows up in the emptiness you feel at a crowded party. It's there behind the polite smile you wear when you know you don't belong. And a loving partner, yet deep inside, they still feel something is off. They scroll through social media endlessly, shop impulsively, travel nonstop, but only to numb a vague emptiness within. That isn't happiness. That is a subtle form of dukkha. The Buddha never gave a single definition of suffering. Instead, he opened a door for us to observe it ourselves. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the discourse on setting the wheel of Dhamma in motion, he described the many faces of suffering. Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Illness is suffering. Even clinging to the five aggregates, our body and mind, is suffering. If we look closely, almost no one escapes these experiences. Who hasn't longed for something and failed to get it? Who hasn't had to let go of something they loved? Who hasn't feared losing what they cling to? Fear of loss. And the cycle of suffering resumes once again. We often think suffering arises only when something major happens, like death, failure, or disaster. But the truth is, suffering has been here all along. We just haven't been mindful enough to recognize it. It exists in the annoyance of a traffic jam, in the disappointment when no one likes your post, in the constant pressure to maintain a certain image or identity. Suffering is not far away. It doesn't just show up in rare tragedies. It's in the everyday moments. Like a tight pair of shoes. They may not cut your skin, but they constantly rub against it. You can't walk freely. Every step feels limited, constrained. And eventually, you get used to that feeling. Just as someone who wears tight shoes for too long thinks that's normal, we, too, become numb to our suffering. That's the greatest tragedy, not that we hurt, but that we don't see the hurt. He simply wanted us to see clearly, to touch the wound, so we can begin to heal. If we don't recognize suffering, there's no motivation to end it. Is it my circumstances? Or is it my mind that doesn't know contentment? Only when we can answer these questions truthfully can we take our first real step toward transformation. 2. The 3 layers of suffering: biological pain, psychological longing. In the Buddhist teachings, dukkha, suffering, is not a single event but a system, a chain of interwoven links. Each layer of suffering is interconnected, forming a complex web that keeps us bound, often without us even knowing it. The first layer: biological suffering, the inescapable cycle of the body. The first and most visible layer is biological suffering, bound to the physical body we carry from birth until death. Birth, aging, sickness, and death. We don't get to choose where or how we're born. We can't stop the passage of time. All of us are aging, cell by cell, moment by moment, until this body ultimately returns to dust. This is a truth that no one escapes, a fundamental law of nature. And yet, we live as though death is a distant myth. We paint over wrinkles with cosmetics, spend hours in the gym, and even resort to surgery to fight aging. But time shows no mercy. Each step forward changes our bodies irreversibly. Young people often think they're free from suffering. Illness and death seem like problems for the distant future, a stark reminder of our fragile mortality. The Buddha didn't teach this to scare us, but to awaken us. This body, he said, is a vessel of suffering, not something to hate or reject, but something not to cling to as if it were permanent. This body is like a boat, useful for crossing the river, but not something to attach yourself to. The second layer: psychological suffering, the pain of desire, aversion, and loss. The second layer is more emotional, suffering rooted in the heart and mind. It arises when desires are unmet, when we face what we hate, or when we lose what we love. We want something, and life refuses. We long for success, wealth, love, but always feel it's never enough. Even when we attain it, fear of loss creeps in. And when it's gone, we fall into anguish and blame. Think of the time you fell deeply in love, only to be abandoned. The pain wasn't simply from their leaving. It was from the attachment you formed, the expectations you built around who they should be. You weren't mourning the person, they're still alive. You were mourning the story you created about them. Other times, he spoke of separation from the beloved, a deep sorrow that arises when we lose someone dear, whether through distance, divorce, or death. Existential suffering, the clinging to ego and denial of impermanence. The deepest layer of suffering is also the most hidden: existential suffering. It emerges from our clinging to the ego and our refusal to accept impermanence and incompleteness. We live with the illusion of a solid, separate self. I must be recognized. I deserve better. I should be in control. And when these expectations aren't met, we suffer. Consider a young person diagnosed with terminal cancer. Beyond the physical agony, there's often a deeper, more invisible torment. Why me? I'm still young. I had dreams. That is existential suffering, not just grief, but outrage. A feeling that life has betrayed the illusion of fairness. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent, not self, and ultimately unsatisfying. Suffering doesn't arise because life is wrong. It arises because we want it to be something it is not. Seeing the whole picture, not to lament, but to liberate. These 3 layers of suffering are not meant to overwhelm us or drown us in despair. They are mirrors, inviting us to see clearly. Just as a prisoner must first realize he is trapped before he can escape, we must first recognize our suffering in all its forms to find our path to freedom. Suffering doesn't lie solely in our circumstances. It lies in our response to those circumstances. And only by looking deeply within, into our habits of craving and clinging, can we begin to loosen the grip. 3.3. Not all pain is suffering. The difference between pain and dukkha. If you've ever sat alone in the quiet of the night, reflecting on life, you may have noticed something. There are times when we feel pain, but that pain doesn't always turn into suffering. And sometimes, what we perceive as painful isn't caused by the situation itself, but by our resistance to it. In the Buddhist teachings, there is a crucial and subtle distinction. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is a natural part of life. From the moment we are born, pain accompanies our existence. Headaches from the weather, a toothache from decay, or a scraped knee. These are all natural biological responses. Even emotions like sadness, disappointment, or grief are forms of psychological pain. This is what medicine calls primary pain, the unavoidable part of being alive. The Buddha never denied the existence of pain. He didn't claim that enlightened beings don't feel pain. On the contrary, he taught that by fully understanding pain, we can transcend suffering. Suffering, when the mind resists pain. In Pali, suffering is called dukkha, but it's not simply about unpleasant feelings. Dukkha refers to the mental reaction of aversion, resistance, and refusal to accept what is happening. When someone has a headache and becomes frustrated because they can't focus, the anger, complaints, and worry, that's suffering. The pain is real, but the emotional resistance is what makes it worse. The Buddha once shared a well-known analogy in the Anguttara Nikaya. An untrained person is struck by two arrows. One is the physical arrow, the other is the mental arrow. A wise person is only struck by the first. The first arrow is the unavoidable pain. The second arrow is our reaction to it. And it's this second arrow that causes deeper harm. The rain and the mind, a simple metaphor. Imagine you're walking outside, and suddenly it begins to pour. If you simply acknowledge it's raining, you can find shelter or enjoy the walk. But if you get angry, feel unlucky, complain about your day being ruined, that inner discomfort is suffering. Students are taught to note, this is pain, this is sadness, this is worry. By observing rather than reacting, pain may remain, but suffering is greatly reduced. The enlightened still feel pain, but are free from suffering. In the Buddha's own life, he experienced aging, illness, and physical discomfort. When slandered, he listened without anger or defense. A Zen master once said, "The awakened still feel this life, but are not bound by any emotion." A real-life example, losing a job, finding awareness. Consider a common situation. A middle-aged man loses his job after many years of service. He could respond with suffering, blaming others, drowning in despair. But if he accepts the reality and asks, "What can I learn from this?" then the pain becomes a gateway to awakening. Some people, after losing their jobs, return to the countryside, live simply, practice meditation, and discover peace. Others retrain and find work they truly enjoy. In both cases, the pain is real, but suffering no longer dominates. But about learning to fully be with pain without turning it into suffering. If you cannot see the difference between the two, without judgment or resistance, you've already taken your first step on the path to liberation. 3.4. The story of a mother who lost her child. A young mother held her lifeless child in her arms. Her son, who had been the light of her life, had died suddenly. Refusing to accept the unbearable truth, she wandered from house to house. "Go into the village and bring me a handful of mustard seeds from a home where no one has ever died." The mother, filled with hope, rushed to the village. She knocked on doors, one after another. "My husband passed away," and so on. House after house, the truth slowly dawned on her. Death had touched every household. Her pain was not unique. Her suffering, while overwhelming, was not isolated. As the sun began to set, she sat on the side of the road, the lifeless body of her son beside her. But now, her tears had shifted. They were no longer of protest, but of understanding. She returned to the Buddha and whispered, "I now understand. I no longer ask you to revive my child. Instead, Please teach me the way out of this suffering." The Buddha accepted her as a disciple. From that moment, Kisagami began her journey, not away from pain, but toward inner liberation. This story is not just a tale of ancient times. Suffering is universal, and when we stop resisting it, when we truly see it, we begin to awaken. Grief does not end in forgetting. It ends in transformation. Let this story be a gentle reminder. Even in the darkest hour, the path to awakening is always available. It begins with seeing clearly, and it continues with the courage to walk through pain, not to escape it, but to be free from it. 3.5. What kind of suffering are you experiencing? A mirror back to yourself. Throughout our journey so far, we've delved into the many layers of suffering, from the ordinary moments of daily life to the profound losses that shake the very foundation of our being. We've explored the 3 levels of suffering as taught by the Buddha, distinguished between pain and suffering, and listened to the awakening story of a grieving mother. All of these reflections point to one essential truth. Suffering is present in every breath of life, whether we see it or not. And now, with this detailed map in hand, it's time to turn inward and face a seemingly simple, yet deeply transformative question. At which level are you suffering? Suffering is already within you. Do you recognize it? Modern life is busy, demanding, and full of distractions. It's easy to lose ourselves in the whirlwind of work, responsibilities, ambitions, and unrealized dreams. Yet beneath the surface of success, wealth, but to gaze directly into your inner world. What do you see? Are you exhausted, chasing goals you no longer even believe in? Do you smile out of habit, while inside there's a hollow emptiness? Are you staying in a relationship where love has long faded, holding on out of fear rather than connection? Did you once hope passionately, only to now feel numb, distant, or disillusioned? All of these experiences, even if they don't involve physical pain, are manifestations of dukkha, of suffering. Suffering doesn't always arrive as a catastrophe. Often, it creeps in through a lack of meaning, a disconnect between our ideals and our reality, an endless craving for more, or a deep attachment to the past or anxiety about the future. Family, work, health, emotions. Where is suffering showing up in your life? Take a moment to examine the key areas of your life, as though you were conducting an honest self-audit. In your family, are you living in harmony, or swallowing unspoken sadness every day? Are you fulfilling your roles as parent, child, partner, with authenticity and peace? Ask yourself, if money weren't an issue, would I still choose this? In your body, is your physical health quietly crying out while you push it aside with thoughts like, just a little more? Are you truly giving yourself rest and care? In your emotions, do you often feel sad without knowing why? Are you harboring resentment in silence? Are there things you've never dared to say, not even to yourself? In every one of these dimensions, suffering may have taken root. But suffering doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. It sinks deeper, settles into the subconscious, and waits until one day it erupts as crisis. Recognizing suffering isn't a complaint. It's the beginning of awakening. Perhaps reading this makes you feel heavy. But remember, realizing you are suffering is not weakness. In fact, it's a powerful sign of awakening. In the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha didn't speak of suffering to make people pessimistic. He presented suffering as the first noble truth because we must first see clearly where we are wounded before any healing can begin. If you've ever felt lost, empty, or cried out silently, "I'm not okay," know this. You are not alone. Suffering is part of the human condition, but it can also be the very door to awakening if you learn to pause and turn inward. Where is it arising from? And are you, unknowingly, keeping it alive each day? If you're brave enough to ask, you'll see your suffering isn't truly coming from your boss, your ex, or the world. It arises from your expectations, your cravings, your attachments, and the way you believe life should go. And that brings us to what the Buddha reveals in the next truth. The second noble truth, samadhi, the origin of suffering, where we realize that suffering is not only imposed upon us by the world, but that we ourselves, in our ignorance, are also unknowingly creating it. But before we step into that, take one more breath. The mirror is still in your hand. The question still echoes. Where am I suffering? The answer isn't in a book or a sermon. It's already within you, waiting to be seen. Part 4. Suffering as a silent ache, the pains that have no name. 4.1. The silence within. There is a kind of suffering that cannot be named, that has no clear shape or origin. It doesn't resemble the pain of losing a loved one, of illness, or betrayal. It simply exists, quietly, persistently, like a fine mist that never lifts. It seeps into the heart and slowly numbs it. You might be living in a comfortable home, surrounded by loved ones, with a stable job and a life others may envy. On the surface, nothing seems to be missing. And yet, why does this feeling arise? This is a subtle form of dukkha, the suffering the Buddha spoke of, as we explored in section 3.1. Dukkha isn't limited to physical pain. It also refers to deep dissatisfaction, disconnection, and the gnawing sense that life is not quite whole. There are people who've never experienced any great tragedy, and yet they walk through life carrying the quiet thought that they are dying a little more inside each day. They go to work, meet friends, smile and function, but everything feels like a hollow routine. They no longer feel truly alive. The connection with themselves has been lost. Modern psychology calls this the existential vacuum, a state of inner emptiness where life lacks meaning. Each day feels like a mechanical loop. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. There is no excitement, no passion, no spark. Life becomes a series of functions, nothing more. This kind of suffering is invisible. It doesn't begin with a single event. There's no one to blame. And because of that, it slowly erodes us from within. Others can't see it, but the person experiencing it feels it vividly. The sleepless nights, the vacant stares in crowded rooms, the numb scrolling through screens, hoping for something to feel real. So why is it that the more modern life becomes, the more quietly we suffer? The answer lies in a silent trade-off. In our pursuit of comfort, achievement, and recognition, we often sacrifice our connection with ourselves. We become so busy maintaining the image others expect from us that we forget how to listen to our own hearts. We live for validation, for reputation, for goals that may not even be ours, and lose touch with what we truly feel. There was once a viral post on Reddit that touched the hearts of thousands. A man living in New York shared how he had a high-paying job, a loving wife, well-behaved children, and everything people dream of. And yet, each morning, he felt like he was putting on a mask to face the world. Everything seemed fine, except his soul. He didn't understand why he was so weary, so joyless, so disconnected from the life he was supposedly living. He wrote, "Maybe the most painful thing isn't losing something. It's being unable to feel anything, even when you have everything." That sentence resonated with tens of thousands. Because at some point, we've all felt a version of that. A vague sadness without reason, a sense of, I'm not good enough. A feeling of living someone else's life. In Buddhist teaching, this is one of the deepest forms of suffering. The suffering that comes from being disconnected from our true nature. When we stray from our essence, when we no longer live mindfully and from the heart, we can have everything externally and still be deeply unfulfilled. But here's the key. Recognizing this suffering isn't about indulging in despair or self-pity. It's about beginning the journey back home. We cannot heal what we cannot see. But once we dare to face it, even the formless, where do they come from? Are they just a natural part of life? Or are they the result of accumulated thoughts, choices, and karmic patterns long embedded in us? Could it be that we, though unintentionally, are the very architects of much of our suffering? The answer awaits in Samadhi, the second noble truth, the origin of suffering. 4.2. I do not know what I am living for, lost in a life full of choices. There is a paradox of our modern age that many of us silently face. The more choices we have, the more lost we feel. In the previous section, we touched upon the subtle suffering, the kind that no one sees, that has no name, yet seeps into every moment of life. It is that inexplicable emptiness, the feeling of, I have everything, yet nothing makes me feel truly alive. And as we continue to look deeper, a great question begins to arise in the mind. What am I living for? Or perhaps it comes from nothing in particular, just a quiet, persistent confusion. I live like a machine. Each day repeats itself, and I no longer know for what, or for whom. In today's world, We have an abundance of choices. What career to pursue, where to live, whom to love, how to spend each day, all lie in our own hands. The internet opens doors to countless opportunities. Yet because everything is possible, we do not know what is truly worth choosing. Without an inner compass, we are easily lost amidst 1,000 crossroads. Without choices, life feels suffocating and confined. Yet with too many choices, we can fall into crisis. Some psychologists call this the paradox of freedom, when people are free to choose anything. In an international survey of thousands of young people, when asked, "Do you know what you are living for?" more than 60% answered, "Not sure." They had degrees, jobs, and friends, yet could not say they lived for anything deeper than money or recognition. They felt empty, but did not know why. Looking back at the past, we see something remarkable. Our ancestors, though they had far fewer material comforts and far fewer options, rarely fell into such existential drift. Why? Because they had a core set of values, passed down through generations. They lived in harmony with nature, with the village, with tradition and order. Life was simple, yet rich in meaning, caring for family, honoring parents, and enough to keep one from losing their way. Today, that foundation of values is fading. As spiritual anchors, religion, tradition, moral codes are dismissed as outdated. The modern person loses a place to turn inward. We are swept along by outer development while neglecting the inner journey. A deep study on existential crisis in adults notes. The crisis does not begin when one loses everything, but when one has everything and still feels empty. This is when a person begins to ask, what is the meaning of life, if in the end? This is called avijja, ignorance, not seeing clearly the true nature of life, not understanding what suffering is, not knowing why we suffer, not seeing the path that leads to the end of suffering. Under the sway of ignorance, we live like travelers in a fog, still walking, but unaware of where we are headed. Buddhism reminds us, without a spiritual orientation, without the practice of mindful reflection, any one of us, young or old, successful or ordinary, can fall into existential crisis. A young graduate of 25 may feel lost, unsure which career path to take among countless possibilities. A middle-aged person of 40, having achieved social goals, may begin to feel an emptiness and ask, what next? Even a 70-year-old, nearing the end of life, may awaken in the night with the thought, I have never truly lived in accordance with my heart. Such examples are far from rare. There will always be a sense of lack, no matter how full life looks on the outside. When we lose connection with our own being, there is no place in the world that can give us a true sense of belonging. Yet there is beauty here. Being lost, when faced honestly, can be the beginning of awakening. When we can truly admit, I do not know what I am living for. This is not failure. It is the first step towards seeking real meaning. In the Dharma, the meaning of life is not found in outer things. Every mindful moment is a step on the path back to our true home. 4.3. When success doesn't make you happy. A true story from Reddit. I have everything most people dream of, a loving family, a 6-figure job, a beautiful house, a luxury car. And yet, every morning, I wake up feeling like I'm falling into a bottomless void. I don't understand why I feel so empty. These were the opening lines of a post that went viral on Reddit, written by an anonymous man. Strangers from around the world flooded the comment section, not to criticize, but to say, me too. What seemed like a personal confession struck a universal nerve in today's society, where success no longer guarantees happiness. This man wasn't sick. He hadn't faced any recent trauma. He wasn't struggling financially. But inwardly, he was lost, trapped in a fog of meaninglessness, emptiness, and quiet despair. So the big question arises. But once people check off all the boxes on their life goals list, many are stunned to discover fulfillment still hasn't arrived. They sit in beautiful homes, scroll through curated lives on social media, yet feel as barren inside as a desert at dusk. Success, when defined solely by external achievements, titles, money, recognition, is like indulging in a lavish banquet that lacks true nourishment. Outwardly full, but inwardly starved for something we can't quite name. The Buddhist perspective. True happiness doesn't come from the outside. Buddhism offers a radically different lens. The Buddha himself was born a prince, surrounded by luxury and privilege. And yet, he renounced it all in search of something deeper, and into the suffering that plagues all of human existence. Why? Because he realized that peace and joy don't come from external success, but from inner understanding. The more we chase pleasure, control, and recognition, the more we drift away from genuine freedom of the heart. Buddhism calls that inner emptiness dukkha, a fundamental unsatisfactoriness that arises when we're disconnected from our true nature. When we lack clarity about who we are and why we live. No amount of success can fill the void. Not an isolated case, but a quiet epidemic of the 21st century. The Reddit story is far from unique. It represents a silent wave sweeping across the modern world. Young adults feel lost right after graduation. Middle-aged professionals reach career peaks and fall into depression. Even the elderly, after a lifetime of doing everything right, ask on their deathbeds, what was the point of it all? In an age where everything seems possible, people are losing touch with what's meaningful. And few things are more paradoxical than feeling spiritually bankrupt while being materially wealthy. Are we chasing joy in the wrong direction? Perhaps the more important question isn't, how do I succeed? But rather, why do I want to succeed? If success simply means accumulating things that look good on paper but don't bring peace to the heart, then maybe it's just a gilded cage. Beautiful, but still a prison. And letting go of what doesn't belong to us. When we stop resisting the present moment and stop clinging to imagined futures, happiness begins to bloom. Right here, right now. Preparing for the next chapter. Are we unknowingly creating our own suffering? At this point, you might realize what we label as success can sometimes be the very chain we wrap around ourselves. No one is forcing us to suffer. We unknowingly do it to ourselves. But once we see this clearly, suffering is no longer a life sentence. It becomes the doorway to freedom. 4. Why does modern life bring more suffering? The trap of the digital age. We are living in the most advanced era humanity has ever known. Anxiety, depression, burnout, and a sense of emptiness are no longer exceptions. They have become common experiences. The more modern life becomes, the more restless the human heart seems to grow. Why? We scroll endlessly, bombarded by highlights of other people's lives. Vacations, promotions, perfect bodies, happy families. The curated moments of others flood our screens. And then we look at ourselves. Our life, with its ordinary routines and invisible struggles, suddenly seems not enough. This constant comparison erodes our self-worth and fuels a silent kind of suffering. We may not realize it, but deep down, we begin to feel inadequate, left behind, or broken. Even our achievements lose their joy when placed beside someone else's highlight reel. 2. Disconnection from nature and our roots. Modern life also means urban life, concrete buildings, artificial lights, air conditioning, and 12-hour workdays. While our ancestors watched the sunrise, planted seeds, and walked barefoot on the earth, many of us now spend most of our time in boxes, rooms, offices, cars, and screens. This physical separation from nature mirrors a deeper emotional and spiritual disconnection. We no longer feel part of a larger whole. Instead, we feel isolated, burdened with individual responsibility and performance pressure. The natural world is a silent teacher. Having so much on our plate, or not having time to rest. Yet, this constant motion often masks a painful truth. We don't know how to be still. Being busy keeps us from facing ourselves. Because when we stop, when the noise fades, we might be forced to ask hard questions. Am I truly happy? Do I know why I'm doing all this? What am I running from? Ironically, the faster we move. Promotions, possessions, believing these will finally bring the happiness we crave. But the more we look outward, the less space we have inside. Without inner stillness, without a place of quiet reflection, we become like a tree without roots, easy to fall when the storm hits. 5. The Buddhist view, losing the path back inward. In Buddhist teaching, true liberation comes not from adding more, but from turning inward. Suffering, or dukkha, arises not from lack of achievements or possessions, but from clinging to illusions, chasing desires, and forgetting our true nature. Modern life makes this even harder. Everything around us encourages grasping, new gadgets, new goals, new distractions. But peace comes not from grasping, but from letting go. To suffer less, we must return inward. We must reclaim our capacity to be present, to breathe deeply, and to simply be, without needing to prove, compare, or control. 6. A world that moves fast, but forgets to feel. Perhaps the saddest irony of the modern world is this. We have made everything faster: travel, communication, production, learning, but we have forgotten how to feel deeply. We rush through meals, conversations, and even milestones. We are surrounded by content, but starved for meaning. We have more entertainment than ever, but less joy. More stimulation, but less stillness. We may have everything, yet feel nothing. A glimpse ahead. No matter how successful we become, no matter how many options we chase, we'll always feel something is missing. In the next section, even the most modern life will feel like an empty chase. Busy, bright, but deeply meaningless. Let us pause here and reflect. Is the life I'm building taking me closer to peace, or further away from myself? Part 5. The second noble truth, the roots of all suffering: greed, hatred, and ignorance. 5.1. What is samadhi? Why does the mind accumulate suffering? When we speak of the second noble truth, samadhi, we are not talking about a sudden or random cause of suffering. Rather, it is the habitual, unconscious storing of these mental formations over time that becomes a reservoir of suffering. Most people assume suffering comes from external circumstances: a failed relationship, a lost job, a health crisis. But according to the Buddha, these are only conditions, not the root. The true source of suffering lies in the mind's tendencies. To want what it doesn't have, to cling to what it likes, to resist what it dislikes, and to remain unaware of its own inner workings. These tendencies, greed, lobha, hatred, dvesha, and delusion, moha, do not arise overnight. They are accumulated, often from early life or even previous lifetimes. This is why many people live seemingly perfect lives, good careers, loving families, unmet desires. All these accumulate layer by layer, like sediment in a riverbed, until we are no longer aware they are there. But they shape our thoughts, our choices, our reactions. Without realizing it, we are often responding to life through the lens of an overfilled mind. Let's revisit the previous section. We explored why people in the modern world feel increasingly lost and anxious, despite having more choices and comforts than ever before. Now we see one of the hidden reasons: and fate, without realizing that we are carrying the seed and fuel of suffering within our own hearts. 5.2. The more you crave, the more you suffer. The trap of desire. At the heart of suffering lies a seemingly simple truth: craving. In Buddhism, this is known as ta, thirst, desire, or craving, and it is one of the primary roots of dukkha, or suffering. It is not just about greed for money or sensual pleasures. The nature of craving is far more subtle and deceptive than we often realize. We crave comfort. We crave recognition. We crave success, certainty, and control. Even within spiritual practice, there may be craving, the desire for enlightenment, for peace, for freedom from suffering. We want spiritual results and mistake that for genuine liberation. But any kind of craving, no matter how noble it appears, binds the mind in restlessness. Desire is a trap that promises happiness while deepening dissatisfaction. It whispers, just a little more, and you'll be content. But once we obtain what we long for, the satisfaction is fleeting. A new craving arises. And so the cycle continues, always reaching, never arriving. In modern life, this craving is amplified by a culture of endless choices and comparisons. But behind this glossy facade is a silent suffering, the exhaustion of chasing shadows. There's an old Zen story that illustrates this truth beautifully. A student comes to a master seeking wisdom. The master pours tea into the student's cup, but keeps pouring until it overflows. The student exclaims, "It's full. No more will go in." The master replies, "Like this cup, your mind is full of your own opinions and desires. How can I show you the way unless you first empty your cup?" Desire fills us up until there's no space left for wisdom. The Buddha taught that it is not the object of craving that binds us. It is the craving itself. Recognizing this is the first step toward freedom. We start by observing the mind, gently, without judgment. Notice how desire arises. Watch how it drives your thoughts and actions. And then, little by little, loosen its grip. When we stop chasing after the next thing, we begin to touch the stillness that has always been here. In this stillness, there is enough. In this moment, we are already whole. In the next section, we will explore another root of suffering. Anger, the fire of aversion that burns the one who holds it. While desire pulls us forward with longing, anger pushes us back with rejection. Both are forms of bondage, but a deep aversion that poisons the heart over time. Many people believe that suffering caused by anger is about occasional bursts of temper, yelling, slamming doors, or arguing. But in reality, this suffering is increasingly common. Take, for instance, the pressures of contemporary life. We set high expectations for ourselves, to be successful, to be recognized. They grow into frustration, then into resentment, and finally into a quiet rage that exhausts the soul. In Buddhist psychology, anger is like a fire. I carry so much hatred toward those who wronged me, he said. How can I find peace? The monk handed him a large sack of stones and said, carry this bag up the mountain and back every day, and come back to me in a week. After 7 days of heavy climbing, the young man returned, exhausted. Why did you make me do this? He asked. The monk replied, each stone is like a grudge you hold. Who suffers more, the one you resent, or you who carry the weight every day? This story cuts to the core. Anger does not punish the other person. It imprisons us. And yet, many of us willingly carry this weight for years. Let me share a real story, one that's far too familiar for many people. There was a man named Jonathan, a successful entrepreneur in his 40s. On the surface, he had it all: a thriving company, a beautiful home, admiration from peers. But beneath that polished image was a wound that never healed. He never forgave his father. Every time he felt criticized or dismissed, even by strangers, it triggered old memories, and his reaction would be disproportionate. He was easily angered, always on edge, and found it hard to maintain close relationships. His success only amplified the suffering, because deep down, he was still that child, burning with silent rage. He went to therapy, joined spiritual retreats, even took up meditation. But it wasn't until he confronted the root, his unwillingness to forgive, that healing began. The Buddha taught that anger is one of the 3 poisons, alongside greed and delusion. It is one of the most destructive forces within us, not only because it harms others, but because it robs us of clarity, peace, and the capacity to love. In modern society, anger often hides behind masks, sarcasm, cynicism, harsh judgments of others, and especially ourselves. We lash out because we feel powerless. We criticize because we can't control. But beneath it all is a deep hurt, unaddressed and unloved. Healing begins not by suppressing anger. As we continue exploring the roots of suffering, we'll soon encounter the 3rd poison, delusion. If greed is the craving for more, and anger is the rejection of what is, then delusion is the fog that prevents us from seeing clearly in the first place. In the next section, we'll journey into that fog and discover how ignorance, not evil, lies at the heart of human suffering. 5.4. Blinded by ourselves, suffering from delusion. There exists a kind of suffering more silent than desire and anger, a pain that doesn't scream, doesn't rage, and is not easy to recognize. It is the suffering caused by delusion, by not seeing, not understanding, not knowing that we are suffering. While desire drives us to chase after things, it has nothing to do with intelligence or education. A person may be well-read, articulate, even a spiritual teacher, yet still deeply deluded. Because delusion, in this context. But as he stepped off the cliff and began to fall, he finally woke up, only to realize it was too late. People later asked, "Why didn't you stop before the edge?" He answered, but in every conversation, he returned to the past, a lost first love, a career choice he never took. He often said, "If I could just go back to when I was 25, I'd choose differently. I'd finally be happy." He lived in the past as though it were still real. Each morning began with regret. Every action in the present was aimed at compensating for what he had missed. He was under the spell of delusion, not because he was unintelligent, but because he thought he knew what was right. He believed, if I could only fix the past, my life would be fulfilled. What makes delusion so dangerous is that it convinces us that the world is to blame for our suffering. We don't see that it is our distorted perception, our skewed understanding, that's causing the pain. Like someone wearing dark glasses, then declaring the world is bleak. Delusion makes us forget we're wearing the glasses. The Buddha named delusion as one of the three poisons, the three root afflictions of the mind. It doesn't roar like anger or burn like desire. There is no need for shame. Every one of us has been, and may still be, walking in the mist of confusion. What matters is not that we immediately become perfectly wise, but that we genuinely want to see clearly. When we want to see, the Dhamma begins to unfold. In the next section, we will bring together the three roots of suffering, desire, anger, and delusion, to better understand how they connect, and more importantly, how we can begin from exactly where we are. And as the Buddha clearly pointed out, those roots are greed, lobha, hatred, dosa, and delusion, moha. The three poisons that silently infiltrate every thought, emotion, and action. Take a closer look. Some people think they suffer because they're poor, so they strive to become wealthy. But when wealth arrives, they still suffer, this time from anxiety, fear of loss. Do charity, but still feel empty inside. Why? Because delusion remains intact. They haven't truly understood what suffering is, so they can't touch its root. A Zen master once said, "Suffering isn't something to get rid of or conquer. It's something to understand. Only by seeing clearly the internal cause can suffering truly be transformed." Many people ask, "I've tried everything. Why am I still suffering?" And the honest answer may be, because you haven't seen the root, your own craving, hatred, and delusion. Have you ever questioned a stubborn belief and found it was just a shield protecting a deeper fear? If not, perhaps you're still seeking comfort, not true liberation. The Buddha never taught us to fix suffering by patching symptoms. He taught us to see its cause, so we can uproot it entirely by our own insight. Like a wise doctor who doesn't just treat the fever, but searches for the virus underneath. A true Dharma practitioner doesn't stop at pleasant states, but dives into the very core of ignorance. The truth is simple. Suffering is an effect. Craving and ignorance are the causes. If we don't touch the cause, suffering never ends. Not even if we spend our whole life in temples, chanting, or meditating in peace. The hardest part of the spiritual path is not keeping precepts, nor meditating for long hours. It is to see ourselves clearly, completely, honestly, without excuses. This kind of seeing doesn't come from books. It comes from meeting every emotion, every restless thought, every flicker of greed, anger, or confusion as it arises within. We don't need to attain enlightenment to stop suffering. We only need to start seeing where suffering begins and stop watering those seeds. And that is exactly where the Four Noble Truths lead us. From dukkha, suffering, to samadaya, the origin, and next, to nirodha, the cessation of suffering. Because only when the root is exposed can we cut it completely. Why am I still suffering, even though I've done nothing wrong? That was the question Daniel asked me one quiet autumn afternoon, as golden sunlight spilled softly through the window. He was 34, educated, kind, a good man by any standard. He hadn't hurt anyone. He lived simply and mindfully. He practiced meditation every morning, donated to charity monthly, and even volunteered to teach yoga to children with disabilities on weekends. And yet, he was suffering. Not the kind of suffering you could name. Not illness, not poverty, not heartbreak. It was something quieter, something subtler. A silent weight that pressed on his chest day after day, a dull ache that followed him like a shadow with no name. He once told me, "It's like I'm alive on the outside, but something inside me has died. I go through the motions, smiling, working, speaking, but nothing feels real anymore." And maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've sat alone in the middle of the night, in a comfortable room, with everything you should need, and still felt a strange emptiness inside. Nothing bad has happened. And under the shade of a Bodhi tree, in the stillness of deep meditation, he discovered something simple, yet profound. Suffering is unavoidable, but it is also the beginning of awakening. From this insight, he distilled four noble truths, not as dogma, not as distant philosophy, but as a living path that anyone can walk. Not just monks, not just saints. Everyday experiences, the raw, unfiltered moments where suffering arises and where liberation quietly begins. This is not a sermon. It's not even